For this presentation, we'll discuss the historical background of the Roe versus Wade, the pro-life, and the pro-choice agendas. Examples of lobbying and advocacy, the use of Edward Bernays' public relations principles, theories of the public opinion, and also the impact of Donald Trump's Supreme Court appointments. Okay.
Okay, so first we're going to talk about the historical background and the significance of Roe v. Wade. The Roe v. Roe versus Wade case was decided in 1973 when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that women's rights to privacy under the Fourth Amendment protected their decisions to have an abortion. This decision was legalized, and abortion nationwide became a landmark in reproductive right for gender equality. However, this case also sparked a lot of the longest running political and moral debates in national history, in the American national history.
Almost 50 years later, that precedent was overturned. On June 24, 2022, the Supreme Court ruled in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, effectively reversing Roe v. Wade and returning the power to regulate abortion to individual states. This reversal marked a major shift in the U.S. constitutional law and reignited national division around women's rights and state control.
Okay, so having now a little bit of context of what we're talking about the pro-life versus the pro-choice agendas, plus the loving examples. So according to the documentary, the pro-choice agenda focuses on the woman's right to choose bodily autonomy and safe medical care. It highlights the abortion as a public health issue and a matter of personal freedom. Pro-choice activists include doctors and organizations like Planned Parenthood and the Center of the Reproductive Rights.
Okay, and on the other side, the pro-life agenda or movement centers on protecting the unborn and considers abortion as morally wrong. And the pro-life groups such as National Rights to Life Committee and Operation Rescue works to restrict or totally ban abortion in the U.S. And they mostly use religious, ethical, and political arguments to support their cause.
Now let's identify three examples from the documentary representing different types of lobbying and advocacy.
So for the direct lobbying in the documentary, we can see like how the members of the National Rights to Life Committee are shown meeting with legislators and influencing policy. This represents the direct lobbying, where organizations communicate directly with the lawmakers to pass anti-abortion legislation, particularly active since the late 1970s.
And another example could be grassroots. This is an indirect example of lobbying. Operation Rescue is a strong example in this case. In the late 1980s and the early 1990s, they organized mass protests and clinic blockades known as Summers of Mercy. And this mobilization of citizens was to pressure politicians and was a kind of example of grassroots lobbying.
And finally, advocacy. Pro-choice organizations like the Center for Reproductive Rights engage in advocacy by taking cases to court, including Jackson Women's Health, the case that ultimately led to the 2022 Supreme Court decision. This strategy focused on defending abortion access through the judicial system.
Okay, so moving forward, talking now on the 3 point is like the Edward Bernays public relations principles. The documentary also illustrates the key public of the relationships principle by Edward Bernays, known as the father of the PR. And the principle one, it's engineering of consent. Bernays said that public opinion can be shaped by strategically representing information to gain consent. In reversing Roe, the pro-life leaders engineered consent by framing abortion as a moral crisis and using emotionally charged imagery and language to influence public emotions and legislative outcomes. Something that it just was like really shocking to me in the documentary. It was just like the images, like of how the religious population used just like to make people afraid of abortion.
And on the principle two, the use of a third-party endorsement, Bernays emphasized the importance of using credible figures or sources to make a more legislative or a legitimate message. For example, in the film, pro-life campaigns use doctors and women who have claimed to gotten abortions and other religious leaders that appear to be trustworthy and very humanitarian. This kind of creates the illusion of independent support, making their arguments more persuasive to the public and to the politicians that may be seeing them.
Well, the fourth theory is public opinion. The two major public opinion theories appear clearly in reversing Roe. For example, the first one is agenda setting theory. This theory states that media and powerful actors don't tell us what to think, but what to think about. In the film, both movements strategically push abortion into the national spotlight through rallies, media coverage, and political debates. By keeping abortion constantly in the public conversation, they set the national agenda.
Yes, and for the framing theory, framing itself just like involves shaping how information is presented. For example, like pro-choice activists frame abortion as a healthcare and human rights issue, while pro-life groups frame it as a moral and life protection issue. The documentary shows both sides crafting like stories and images that influence how society perceives the same reality.
And one other thing that you can see is that you could even apply the spiral of silence theory in this case, since in conservative movements and states, many women and doctors fear speaking openly about abortion due to the social pressure they may endure.
Okay, the next uh, position that we are facing is the impact of the U.S. Supreme Court composition under Trump. During Donald Trump's presidency, three new justices were appointed: Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Their confirmation solidified a conservative majority in the Supreme Court, paving the way for the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, this was like a shift that it was not accidental. It was like the result of decades and decades of lobbying by conservative and religious groups who prioritize the judicial appointments. It demonstrates how long-term lobbying and public relations strategies can shape the legal and political landscape for generations.
And one other thing that we need to speak about that it is very important in this context is the number of states with abortion restrictions after Roe was overturned. So since Roe v. Wade was overturned in June 2022, 12 states have implemented total abortion bans, and more than 40 states have introduced various restrictions, such as gestational limits or mandatory ward waiting periods. And this data comes from the very important sources that have studied the whole thing and which track abortion policies nationwide. And the map of abortion access in the US has become more divided more now than ever.
Okay, in conclusion, reversing Roe demonstrates that the abortion debate in the US is not only about law and morality, it is also about public relations, lobbying, and the power to shape public opinion.
Yeah, like I think like from the grassroots activism to judicial lobbying, both movements have used every tool of persuasion described by Edward Bernays and explained in public opinion theory. And also, I think like now it's 2025, and even though it's supposed like more a topic that is easily to talk, it is not. And more like in a country like as United States, it just like come with like back and forth like so many like topics behind like you can say like oh yeah her body her choice but like as we see in this case just like has like so many things behind that you like don't know even like when you investigate like more deep and deep that's when you just like know.
Yeah, and that's certainly true. Apart from the fact that this documentary and this whole situation shows how strategic communication, a lot of political influence, and long term, well handled lobby could influence a lot of decisions and can completely reshape a lot of things and can completely even reshape the laws of an entire nation.
Yes, this was like for conclusion. We want to thank you for the your attention. We just like want to emphasize like this was just like a really interesting topic and to talk about like just to do the research. And I think it's still a topic that is still in the struggle. It's not like oh yeah, it's like going to be like pro-choice or pro-life. I still it's still like fighting, and so it's interesting to keep researching about it. And thank you for watching our presentation.